Welcome to another episode of When Life Hands You Lemons. This episode is very, very special to me because the guest is one of my best friends from when I was in school at Full Sail. He was also my neighbor, and when we first connected, which was when we all got our launch boxes or our MacBook computers, we were all sitting in the auditorium, and he came up to me right before we had started, everybody turning the computers on, and we're all starting to learning the basics of the Mac. He came up to me and he says, "Hey, aren't we neighbors?" Because prior to that, about a week later, or a couple days prior to that, I was just moving into my apartment, and his was right next door. So ever since then, we just connected. We're like, hey, we live in the same complex. Let's work together. And Julian ended up being one of my best friends through school. He was always there for me. He continually showed how hardworking and talented he is, and he would always have me over to check out projects. He was bouncing ideas off of me. I was sending him music. We always were doing things together. And since graduating, he's moved back up to New York, where he's originally from, and has gone on to do some incredible things. He went over to Jerusalem and filmed a documentary for 2 weeks. He then came back and started pursuing his own company, which he had started prior to Full Sail, which was called AIE Collective, which stands for Apple in I Media, or it used to be Media, Apple in I Collective. He has worked to date with companies like Google, Dr. Pepper, VH1, Discovery Channel, JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, Coors Light, and he's also done some with the American Diabetes Association. A few of his videos that he's edited and worked on have gone viral on Facebook. Furthermore, he's even had one of his videos played in Times Square in New York City. If that isn't just mind-blowing so quickly out of school, I'm not sure what is. So without further ado, Julian doesn't need much of an introduction, even though I provided him with a very elaborate one. Please enjoy this episode with one of my good friends and extremely talented videographers, photographers, and all-around amazing human being, Julian Velez. So I have one of my good friends from Full Sail University here. His name is Julian Velez. He graduated from the film program back in 2016, and he's gone on to do some pretty incredible things within the entertainment industry and marketing industry. And we're going to talk about kind of a little bit what he's done and kind of how he's got there and how he continues to do cool things. So Julian, if you just kind of want to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you've got into this and kind of how you got creative and what kind of inspires you and all that stuff.
Yeah, sure. So, I met Lennon. I met you in the first or second year of school, and that's kind of where I started like telling you about what I did and whatnot. I started everything out pretty much in photography, as almost everyone does. It was some sort of like taking photos of flowers with your like little DSLR when you grow up or something. And then I realized I really liked it. It was like drawing art in middle school wasn't enough for me. So I wanted to take some photos. Parents got me my first camera, and it just ran off from there. I started jumping into wedding photography, as like 99% of every cinematographer has done recently. And I liked it for a little bit, did it for about a solid year, and had some awesome opportunities in there, but definitely wasn't my flavor of creativity that I wanted to do. So I started jumping into video, and our little family vacations when I was growing up, I'd make these little videos. And that was pretty much something that I really wanted to dive into. I just saw really cool technological capabilities that were starting to grow out of just filming video instead of photos, and the technology was growing, bigger resolution and better cameras, and I kind of wanted to be on the forefront of that stuff. So I finished off this wedding thing, and I think I took either a gap year or I started focusing on what I wanted to do for college, and I jumped into Full Sail. Really, really amazing opportunity to go to Full Sail. It's a super cool place. The resources there was the most amazing thing. I didn't have time to jump on any cinema cameras before Full Sail, and being able to kind of jump straight into working with Arri Alexas and working with some of our friends had Red cameras, and jumping straight into that was nice, and on such a frequency. Then after college, I think it was like a month in of searching for jobs, just kind of scrambling for any job I could find. I found one in New York, and they needed me to do a simple shoot. I don't know how they found me. I completely forgot at this point, but I found one in New York, and they actually ended up flying me back down to Florida, which is weird. I flew up there to bring all my gear and my stuff, and then they flew me back down to Miami to do the shoot. And that's kind of where everything completely kickstarted for me. I did that one film, and it didn't go viral or anything, but the everybody was really pleased with how it came out as far as the clients and stuff. And we started getting reoccurring clients through that company. And so my first year was literal nonstop work. Every single day was just me going and shooting, and whether if it was with a DSLR or with an iPhone, even and big cameras too, I would just be constantly shooting something. And that first year, especially in New York, it was just, New York is a catalyst for things that you want to happen. So it really speed boosted me straight into where I'm at now, which is, I'd say, my second year, maybe my third, of kind of working in this industry. And I did a transition. I didn't want to work for that one company anymore. I felt like I was hitting a little bit of a plateau, whether it was financially or creatively. There's only so much that your clients can offer to you, especially when they're reoccurring. Your creativity starts getting a little bit limited, which is a good thing at the beginning. But when you really want to start trying new things and you can't, that's when you need to start moving on. And so that's what I did. I kind of broke free and started professionally pursuing my own company, AIE Collective. And that's where I'm at now. I'm freelance, and I work with whoever wants to work with me, and whoever has the time and the great ideas, they just pop on over and we start collaborating, creating things. AIE Collective to date has been able to work with really big names like Discovery Channel, VH1. We did some stuff for the American Diabetes Association, Google. We've done stuff for JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, a little documentary for Nickelodeon. Dr. Pepper and Coors Light are the most recent one that we're starting to dive into a little bit more branded content here and there. But it's been an amazing ride, and every single day is crazy. So that's where we're at now.
That's really cool. I knew some of the companies that you had worked for, but I didn't realize you had that many to that extent. So that's really, really cool to hear. It's always fun to hear friends and colleagues doing so well, especially after they're graduating and they're really kind of pursuing their dream. So you kind of going back to AIE, I guess, Apple and iMedia. You had that prior to Full Sail, correct?
Yeah. So I right out of wedding photography, I had that gap year where I didn't know what I wanted to do, really. I didn't want to do wedding photography anymore. And I had a friend that was kind of dabbling in a little bit of video work, and he recommended me for like BTS photographer or something like that. And it was on some kind of like travel channel shoot. I think it was like one of my first shoots. And the DP like walked offset, and it was like low ball shoot. So I knew I could like kind of pick up the ball and run after him. And so the director was like, does anybody know how to like work a camera or something like that? And I was like, oh my gosh, this is my chance. So I was like, yeah, I know how to work a camera. And they ended up having me shoot the rest of the day. It was like the last 2-3 hours or something. But that was kind of my like where I started for video. I was like, wow, this was really awesome. It's really cool. I want to do this. And so I started kind of marketing myself out there as a videographer or a cinematographer. Um, and I would start like helping friends with their short films or stuff like that. And I think I did a couple of things, not too many, but more music video related, nothing really to write home about. That's when I kind of realized I needed a little bit more understanding and training in this kind of field. And if I was going to pursue it, I had to do it the right way. So at least for me, the right way was going straight to college and learning the lingo and the rules and all that of how the industry worked. And so I did that.
How have the connections that you've made here at Full Sail, or how have the skills in networking you've learned here kind of progressed throughout the industry? Kind of how important has that been, and how has it led to different opportunities?
Well, as far as opportunities go, Full Sail has really given me some of the bigger opportunities as far as my creativity goes. So when I want to make a passion project or I want to make a film that I obviously know I don't have the budget for, but the idea is there and I know I can be passionate about it and share it with friends. Full Sail is kind of the first place that I turn to. I'm like, hey, where's the alumni? Or even I've been able to work with some Hall of Famers. I don't know if you know Frank Schuring. He's an amazing sound guy. And he helped me on one of my most recent passion projects that we kind of jumped in and did a parody on Vogue thing. He's done some awesome stuff from sound design for Planet Earth to even producing his own films. He's got his own films in the film circuit right now. He's just an awesome guy to work with. And if I wouldn't have gone to Full Sail, I definitely would never have met him. I just kind of contacted him one day and was like, hey, I have this film I want to do, but I know I'm not good at sound design at all, and you're definitely the guy. And so he was like, yeah, sure, give it a shot, shoot it over to me, and let's see how we can work together. I always love kind of forwarding the next generation of people and enabling them to create their dreams. So Full Sail connected me through, or he connected me. Let me start over again. He connected me to a bunch of other people that weren't even from Full Sail. So I got him through Full Sail, but then I started working with another amazing composer. His name's Ben Winwood. Him and Frank worked together on a feature film that I believe came out this year in September, I think it was. It was called The Cage Fighter, blockbuster feature film. And I was able to work on putting together the audio for this parody Vogue thing that I was doing. And I mean, this guy lives in the UK and Frank is somewhere down on the East Coast. So you have like people that are just amazingly talented already in the industry, all through that one Full Sail connection. So I was able to really work that through, and I'm super thankful for that.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of incredible connections out there, and networking is so important here through Full Sail. So kind of going back a little bit, we already talked about kind of your AIA company, or AIE, excuse me, Apple and iMedia company. And I mentioned how rigorous the entertainment industry can be and how you're picking up various clients and continuing to do big things through AIE. I don't know why I keep saying AIA. AIA is a label that owns EDM.com. So I don't know why I keep saying that. So it's kind of just a different vowel.
I changed it from Apple and iMedia because that was a mouthful. Just put it to AIE Collective. It was a lot easier for some people to say. So,
well, being that it's such a rigorous industry, what kind of keeps you going? Like, it's constantly, I can't imagine, like with you and how talented you are and the content that you put out and the clients that you've worked with. How do you continue to keep going? Like, what keeps you going? Like, sometimes I can imagine, get 3 hours of sleep a night because you have to work on a project and then go on, get up at 6 a.m. and then go right to the next gig. What keeps you going other than passion and the people?
Wow. I mean, the people are a big part. When you work with good people, you want to work with them again. And the passion thing is just, you kind of grow up into it and you're like, wow, I really want to do this. I'm passionate about it. But I would say the passion gets you there, but it's something else that keeps you there. Because I remember it's I think it's different for everybody else, but I remember when I was growing up, I was like, oh my gosh, the Red One's this big cinema camera that came out. I think it was like 2012 or something, and it was like ahead of its time kind of thing. Always crashing too. It was like always burning out. It's a crazy camera, and I was like, oh, if I could just shoot on that $60,000 like thing, I'll be happy. I'll be set. And growing up, I did the chasing the rat thing and then finding a bigger rat to chase once I caught that one. I mean, that camera's completely outdated now. It's still a good camera, but your iPhone shoots 4K. And I have cameras that shoot 4K now, and that thing was like just getting to 4K. We have like 8K cameras now and 16K in like China they have one. So as far as technology, it quickly kind of faded away from me. I was like, well, there's always going to be something better. So why am I making this? And for me, it's the ability to, I'm constantly fascinated by the ability to mold people's hearts and minds by just molding light. I feel like when I'm able to paint a picture and creatively express something and share that with people, that's something for me that is just, I'd rather do that any other day. It's more than a passion for me. I feel like it's almost a lifestyle. I'll be walking down the street in New York with my friends, and they'll be talking to me, and then they completely lose me. They're like, "Where'd Julian go?" And I'm a block down. They didn't even know that I stopped to take a photo of like some alleyway, because I'm completely enveloped in just how the way that light works, or the way that just the city around you is kind of moving and breathing and constantly giving you a different angle or a different shot, different beautiful moments all the time. I feel like I have this eye to notice certain things, certain beautiful things, and I see that constantly. So when someone tells me an idea or someone tells me a script they want to shoot or something, I can kind of put myself into that world with my imagination, and get passionate about it, or get interested about it. And that's kind of what drives me. Just the ability to see something that can mold people's emotions is pretty awesome to me.
Yeah, it's pretty rewarding. I can imagine, like, just kind of delivering that final project and the final thing, and you just kind of see everybody light up and sometimes bring a tear to your eye, because some of the stuff that you've produced is just stunning, and I don't even have any connection to it, but knowing that you're behind it, I know that it's going to be a quality piece, and it's something that it just kind of makes me emotional for a reason that I don't even know why. And it's an incredible thing, and I can imagine how rewarding that would be when you see that and all that hard work, even if you get no money out of it. Just seeing that person light up the way that they do is extremely rewarding.
Yeah, yeah. Me being an extrovert is I mean, some people could say against this, but I say sharing is definitely a part of me being an extrovert. Me being generous or overly generous sometimes is something that I kind of feel entails into my creativity. So when I make something, I automatically kind of want to like share it with people. I'll share rough cuts with people that the video is not even finished, and I'm like, oh, I need your feedback. I honestly just want them to watch it. So that's kind of what keeps me going, that ability to share content and kind of mold emotions and give people a view into a world that's beautiful and that kind of plays with their heart in awesome ways.
Yeah, I think you should somehow factor that into, because you've said it a few times now, factor that into your brand is molding emotions, come up with something, because you can do
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
You can do that. I think that that's something you should try to get in, because it really does factor in with you. So you've worked on some pretty high profile projects. You've worked on with some pretty high profile companies, and you're continuing to focus on AIE as its own company and yourself. How do you find new projects to work on? I know you mentioned that going back to old clients is something that you really enjoy doing and working with people you really like working with. But how do you find new projects? Do you seek them out, or do they kind of come to you?
So at this day and age, I'm still a nobody. So I have to seek out every single client possible. And right now, the best thing for me and the way that it's been working out for me is cold emails, and also just literally running up into people in New York City. New York City is great for networking. That's why I came up here. I think it also beats well with my heart. So, but I literally the other day just ran across one of my friends that I hadn't seen in so long, and he wrote a book and everything. And I was like, oh, hey, how's the book? How are you doing? I didn't even know you were in New York. Let's grab a coffee sometime. And then the next day, he's like, hey, I need to shoot a music video. I was totally not expecting to shoot anything for the next coming days. So it was like you just turn the corner and there it is, at least for me. Other times it's kind of just cold calls and reaching out and being like, hey, I love the content that you guys make. I want to partner with you guys. I want to make something with you guys. And then you get a coffee the week later, and then you just kind of work your way into it. And it takes a lot longer than a lot of people think, but then it's kind of like a wave. It rolls up and then it crashes, and a whole bunch of people just start offering work for you or referring you for jobs. Just this last week, I didn't know that I was going to be filming something. And now I'm going to, on the 25th, I believe. Yeah, the 25th, I'm going to New Mexico. And then through my friend talking to me and a couple of other random people just connecting with me, I'm booked all the way till September for a giant stint of like doing nothing for, I think, like the beginning of September is the first day I'm finally like able to breathe again. So being freelance, you get a lot of that. You get this, there's nothing to do and there's no one to shoot for. And then the next day, like 6 people contact you and you're like, holy crap, okay, whoa, slow down. And you can't slow down. You have to take everything that you can because you don't know that next week there might be nothing for 3 months. And that's the scary piece. But it's also a time where you start getting some rest after that craziness and you're able to think and you're able to rejuvenate your creative juices.
Yeah. So some of the previous clients that you worked for, you had mentioned that you had to part ways with them due to, various circumstances. Were they people that hired you like as an actual employee, or did they hire you as a freelancer? And if they hired you as like an employee, what kind of benefit in your specialty, like filming, why do you think is it better or not to be a freelancer versus actually working for somebody?
So working for somebody starting out, especially when you're, so I'm 22 years old right now, and being this young and trying to have a business is scary. And being 21 and jumping into New York City, having no finances, having no like idea of where I want to stay. A funny story, I actually moved an Airbnb. I think it was like once a week or once every 2 weeks in New York City. For the first 6 months, I didn't have an apartment. I just would come up here and find an Airbnb. And then I would find another Airbnb the next week and find another one because I was like, well, it's just that much cheaper than getting an apartment. And then I can also kind of like say that I'm in a hotel. So anyways, long story short, it just allowed me to be super, super mobile. Working as an employee and kind of working around jumping Airbnbs and stuff like that, I needed stability, especially in New York, because New York isn't going to give you stability. It's crazy. It's chaos. So I needed that like paycheck every 2 weeks so I could understand how New York worked. Like, where's the train lines? Who are the people I need to talk to? Where are my friends? Where's my church? Where's my creativity, like my studios that I'm going to go to? All that I needed to figure out. And it took me, I'd say, about a year to finally level out and feel comfortable in this city without like losing my head every single day. It's a violent city. It kind of just throws you in and chews you up. So having that consistency is definitely something that I needed. And then I also needed the ability to creatively work. So I wanted to still stay in the industry. So, I mean, it was a win-win for me having this creative company that wanted to pay me on the regular and then also wanted me to work shooting videos on the regular, but they're each for like different clients and stuff. That was perfect, amazing for me. But then as I grew in New York, I realized I needed to kind of, whether it was raise my rates for charging more because I've learned more in that past year, or whether it was shoot different projects, like not this talking heads client kind of thing all the time. Maybe I wanted to shoot music videos or projects or short films, which I've been able to do now. I think making that jump from getting that paycheck every 2 weeks to not knowing when your next check is going to come in. It's super scary. It still is. Every single month I'm looking and I'm like, okay, do I have something booked for the next 3 months ahead? Or if I don't, how am I going to figure that out? Being your own boss and then having a house to maintain and then having friends and relationships to maintain, it's just an added tax of kind of just being an adult. And so I'm growing into that right now and stumbling into it, I guess you could say. But it's definitely allowed me to have better opportunities, and I'm taking them as they come.
Yeah, I can agree with the not having a paycheck coming in. It's really scary.
Yeah.
It can be like, because you never know, like, because I did freelancing right after I graduated. And I still do freelancing. I freelance, do writing for different publications. I did some public relations work. I did a little bit of everything, but I was just making enough money to pay rent, and that was it. I wasn't getting ahead on any bills. I wasn't able to put any money away. So I took a full-time job, thankfully at Full Sail, where I was able to stay in the creative realm, and I love it here. I thrive on the people, I thrive on the students, and it's so much fun to see them creatively. And just to get this room booked for the podcast that I'm recording in the library here, there was a group of 7 or 8 students sitting at this big round table working and interacting with each other to collaborate, and they were drawing on the board and everything, and it was really inspiring to see that. But kind of coming back to it, it's that's just the industry. Like, you have to be collaborative, you have to be proactive, and it's interesting to see that. So I completely understand the struggle of having to pay rent and not knowing where that comes from. That's kind of something with freelancing that unfortunately is just how the business goes, especially when you're so young and moving back up into New York. And because New York, especially New York City, is such a chaotic.
Oh my gosh.
And it's expensive, and you never know what's going to happen. Like, literally, they say every day is different, but in New York, I say it's every half hour, if that, is something completely different.
Yeah.
So kind of going off of that, you mentioned kind of raising your rates and everything like that. How, after you graduated, kind of pricing yourself, having the experience, you kind of knew your worth, but at the same time you don't. Like, I'm still trying to figure out what I'm worth, what I want to do, how much I'm charging for mixing, how much I'm charging for writing, how much I'm charging for this, and that. How did you kind of base yourself on how much you're worth versus, when you graduated and then you've worked on some high profile clients like with Dr. Pepper and Google and all these big companies? Does your rates go up every time you work on something like that, or how do you kind of factor that in? How do you figure that out?
Well, so knowing your worth, oh my gosh, is so difficult in a city that doesn't want to give you any worth.
But it's very important.
It's so important. I was for getting the financial side of things for a little bit. I had the opportunity to shoot a commercial for VH1, and they had to fly us out to New Orleans to do the shoot. We had this like big 40 kid band that was going to be playing outside on the streets, and it was going to be great. And so the person, I forget who was booking the flights, someone on VH1 wanted to book the flights for us. So they asked for our IDs, and I was 21 at the time, and they called the director. They came back and called the director, and they said, "Hey, your DP, he's only 21. Is that correct?" And I was in the background, like, listening to this conversation, just completely being ashamed of, like, just my age, just trying to break that mold of saying, "Hey, I can do this. Don't worry about it." Like, if there's a reason why you love this video that, like, we sent you before, that's why you're hiring us, because of the content you love, not because of how old we are. And so the director went, like, had a little back and forth and was like, "Yeah, is that a problem? Or you, like, what's wrong with him being 21?" And it was just, it kind of hurt me, kind of trying to be this person in New York City and then realizing that people don't fully see me for who I am. I kind of have to mold that around and make that something else for people to see. I mean, the commercial turned out great. It's still airing nationally, I think, like a year later on TV shows, and it's somewhere out in the West Coast now. It was it turned out actually to be on Times Square too. They created a version for Times Square, and that was up. It was evergreen for, I think, up until this last spring. So it was an awesome opportunity, and it turned out great. And like they had no doubts afterwards. But just trying to find what I thought my value was, and then seeing someone else just attributing a number, just my age, to something and saying, oh, well, I know a 21-year-old back that's going to college right now, and he's a silly goose, so I don't want this 21-year-old on. That kind of value mentality you're always fighting with in New York City. Whether it's your age, whether it's how much content you've made, whether it's even just your professional opinion on something. That was something that I had to fight through, and you constantly have to, especially in New York, fight for your name. Money-wise, it's really a big attribute of, one, you look at what other people are charging that are in the same kind of bracket of what you're doing. So I have a couple of friends that are doing shoots that I like get on or I'm like helping them with, and I find out later on what they're shooting for and what they're worth, and that kind of plays a factor into it. But the biggest factor, honestly, is just I need to be able to afford to live here, and if I didn't up my rates, I would be back home in New Jersey with the parents in the basement, so to speak. And I can't have that. That's kind of gonna stop my dreams prematurely. So I had to up my rates just so I could live here. There comes to a point where you kind of you don't have to worry about that anymore as much. I would say there's some really awesome professional people out there that let's say they charge $15,000 for a music video or something like that. I'm definitely not there. I'd like to say I am, but
You could be.
Yeah, yeah. That's maybe a client will hear this and they'll consider it. But I kind of work my way up to that location where these people, I mean, maybe they have a bigger house, or some people even have families and they have to take care of their family, and that plays a huge role in just knowing what your worth is, what you need to provide. And when you realize what you need to provide, your worth kind of plays a part into that as well. And then you start getting bigger deals, and you start just client after client realizing, oh, if I had, I don't know, $5,000 more, I could have rented this and your video would have been better. So I need to add that to my rate or whatever. You realize after a lot of experience and a lot of shoots, what it just costs to make things awesome, so to speak. And then you just climb that ladder.
Yeah, and you also have to factor in not only your time, because your time, you could be spending that on something completely else that's paying a lot more. So people have to understand that. And some people don't. Plus, they have to factor in the gear that you're using, how much it costs to purchase that gear. And if it breaks, insurance, you have business expenses, you have flight, you have food, you have all kinds of various expenses that sometimes come up all the time. And you have, like, for example, your Adobe subscription every year, that has to come into play. All that stuff factors into, especially when you're running a business. And sometimes people don't understand that, like, oh, you can just use your iPhone and record me, and I can record 4K, but there's something better. I don't have as much control, and a lot of times people don't understand that. So do you ever get clients that will contact you and they'll say, this is my budget, this is what I have, or you'll just get a client and say, I need a music video, or I need a promotional video for my website, and you send them your rates, or you tell them what you're going to do or what that package includes, and they kind of get scared? How do you kind of deal with those clients, like especially in the freelancing world, to not necessarily scare them away, but get them at a point where they'll pay your rate, or a rate that you're willing to negotiate with them, and kind of not lose the client, I guess you could say?
So I would say there's a couple of things that play factors into, first of all, that know your worth thing comes into factor as well. Secondly, the type of client also, like, let's say it's a client that has no budget, but you love the cause. That's something that personally I would kind of pull a little bit out of my savings and make it happen, because I love the cause, or maybe I'm really passionate about it. I think it's going to go somewhere. But it's also this concept of I have had a little bit of that money saved up from that first year of doing like finances, or working with those with that company for a year. So I had a little bit of finances saved up. So I had enough money where I could say yes and no to people. When somebody comes up to you with a fixed budget, it's, at least for me, it's either a yes or a no very, very quickly, because I know that I won't be able to provide what they're looking for at the rate that I need to kind of work with them. If I'm working for someone and they don't have the budget, then I'm pretty much paying myself to work for them, or paying them pretty much essentially. There's been some times where people ask me, "Hey, I have a fixed budget, and can you also throw in your gear for free?" And it's like, well, I mean, no,
Yeah.
that doesn't work like that. You don't go into a Ferrari dealership and say, "Hey, can I have two Ferraris? I only have $30." First of all, they're gonna laugh your head off, their heads off, and secondly, I mean, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people that go into like a Ferrari dealership and they don't buy a car. And then there's those one or two people that do buy the cars, and then they're set again. They're fine. They've sold their quota. I think a lot of people are concerned they're not going to get work, because it's all low paying jobs and whatnot. And I'm not saying don't take the low paying jobs at the beginning. That's all I did when I transferred from freelance, or from being employed to working freelance. That's all I did, because I didn't have a network to connect with. I've been working with the same people for over a year, and I've kind of been in this shell, this like cocoon of really easy work with a constant pay. And so when I had to jump out, I had to take every single thing that I could, from music videos that were like, "Oh yeah, I'll pay you $100 today just so you can hang out and shoot my video," to actual big paying clients. It kind of started mellowing out when I was able to say, okay, I have this one job over here on the left-hand side that's willing to pay me a lot of money, and then I have another job that isn't willing to pay me, and they both want the same date, and then I can just say, well, I have to take the paying job. And that's where I'm at right now. I'm starting to just say I have to say no to certain people, because not because I don't have anything booked that day, and I don't want to work with them, but just because there are those bigger paying clients that are starting to come around the corner and say, "Hey, we heard you from, we found you online, or we saw your Instagram or whatever, and we want to make some content with you." And so that's where I'm at right now, starting to take the bigger jobs just because they're coming around the corner, and starting to say no to jobs that I usually would have always grabbed at because I needed that networking opportunity.
Yeah, you just have to be careful, because sometimes desperation kicks in and you really kind of shoot yourself in the foot. And you
Yeah.
kind of after you finish the project, you've put in 50, 60 hours, and it's like, shoot, why did I even take that gig? That was, I'm not
Exactly.
going to pay rent for that, and they only gave me $100. Like, that was a total waste of time. So now I'm kind of even realizing with some of my writing, I've written for some pretty prolific publications. So now if somebody wants me to do some writing, I'm going to say, well, here's my rate. Well, we can't afford that. And like, I recently had one on Upwork, the freelancing website, and some audio gear blog. They wanted me to write like gear reviews and stuff. And I said, well, here's my rate. And they're like, well, unfortunately, we can't pay that. So we just moved on. And I'm not going to take a gig that's going to pay me $10 per article, because if they're wanting, a lot of time and research, especially in some of the gear that I don't have my hands on and I can't actually use, I'm going to have to do some research on. So that's going to take time as well. So absolutely knowing what your worth is and kind of going off of that and figuring all the stuff that comes into play when you have to work on such a project like that. So that's really cool. So moving on into the kind of a little bit of a detour, but not really. So sometimes I'm sure you have clients, or you probably will eventually if you haven't already, that will come to you and they'll say, I want a music video like this one, or I want this type of effect, or I want this in that, and I want this camera used. How do you keep up with all these different stylings of various shootings, or kind of editing styles, and angling, and the technology used to achieve those types of things? What things do you do to keep up with stuff like that?
So keeping up is, I would say, probably the easiest, or at least understanding how to keep up is the easiest form. When you have a huge networking community, whether it's your full sail crew or the teachers there, or even just your personal community of filmmaking or artistic friends, you have people that kind of know how to do that thing that you saw on that commercial or that music video that you watched and you love the camera angle. I mean, yeah, you can kind of guess what they did, but the awesome piece about it is you probably know somebody that was on that set, or you know someone who knows how to do what they did on that set. You can even go on Instagram now and just DM the director of photography that did some awesome shot in a music video, and he'll message you back. I mean, it's really awesome being this connected with technology this day and age. So finding out how to do something like that is easy. And then let's say a client comes to me and says, hey, I want X, Y, and Z from this music video. Well, I'll go and do my research and figure out, okay, how did they do this and who did they use to do it? I'll figure out what those guys' rates are. If it's out of budget and out of scope, we'll figure out how to work around it with some other people. But usually we just end up kind of hiring out those people that were on that shoot because they already know how to do it. They've done it before, and it's exactly what the client wants. We do have a little bit of creative play, but every now and then there's that one client that needs it to be exactly how they say it, cross the T's, dot the I's. It's got to be exactly this way. And those are I'd like to call them robot clients, where you're just a robot to them. But in the end, they kind of give you a good amount of money, and that's kind of why you stick around. You pay your rents, your month's rent from that one client, and then you kind of just forget about putting any creative desire into it. You have those clients too, I guess.
Yeah, I do. Sometimes there was I forgot what I'm not even gonna talk about it because I want to make sure that I say it right. But there's basically this chart that a musician, his name is Ari Hurston, and I just finished reading his book, How to Make It in the New Music Business, and he has this chart of how it's called the 30 or the perfect 30 chart, and basically each section, there's 3 sections. You have like networking, you have the pay, and you have the enjoyment. So you have to rate each gig based on how much you're going to enjoy it. Okay, I'm going to enjoy it about a 5. And the pay is really good, and the networking is so-so. So if it's under 15, he doesn't take the gig. And if it's over 15, he takes it. So you kind of have to value, like if you have a slow month, and the gig is really paying really well, but it's not something you really enjoy, it's kind of like, okay, I'll take it. And you just kind of deal with it. It's even, if it's a robot client, like you had said, it's something like, whatever, but I kind of need the money this month. Do you ever have those gigs or those shoots where a client will come and ask you something, or they'll have you in the middle of the shoot, or even prior to the shoot, they'll say, hey, I want this done. They've already paid like a retainer, or they've given you a certain percentage of your rate, and you think, I'm not really sure how to do that, but you don't say that to the client because you obviously don't want to leave that impression. How do you kind of overcome that, especially if they're a really good paying client and like you need this gig? How do you overcome that, or what are some things that you do to kind of be like, oh, I got to figure out how to do this, or I got to find somebody that can do this?
So I'd say a perfect example is VH1. Again, I'm gonna keep coming back to these guys because I know I can use them. We had originally gone to shoot this for a Facebook video, and then when we came back from shooting, they had requested that we make it for a 30-second commercial spot. And that wasn't in the deliverables the way that we needed it. And so I was like, oh, okay, that's fine. So we ended up editing it. I was able to edit the commercial as well. We ended up giving them their commercial spot. And then I think like a week or two, maybe like a month later or something, they said, hey, this is doing great. We want to put it in Times Square. And that was definitely completely out of scope. So we had to have a completely different financial conversation about how we're going to do this. And we needed to figure out, like, I've never made anything for Times Square. So having it changing the resolution, and we didn't even shoot vertical video because we were just shooting for Facebook. So we had to completely reframe the entire commercial and figure out what shots we needed in. We needed to add text, this time with graphics and visual effects, and it was like something that was completely out of my league. I had no idea how to do this. Luckily, they had PDFs. The Times Square billboard that we were working with, Viacom, they had their own PDFs on how it has to be and whatnot, their guidelines. And a lot of the bigger companies, when you start working with them, they have these guidelines already set in place. So you just kind of ask for the guidelines and you move forward. With clients that don't have that and they want something crazy done, it's honestly just figuring out. It's most likely always a yes, but it's a yes it's a conditional yes. So it's, yeah, we can do that, but it's either going to cost you more, or it's going to take longer, or it's just it's going to be a little bit more difficult. It's going to take more time on our end, or more quality's got to have to go into it. There's always a cost, and if the client's aware of that and they know that and they can kind of contribute to making sure that that cost is taken care of, then you're totally fine. If there's not, and sometimes you just have to like come up to the realization that you can't complete that, whether it's because, let's say you shot horizontal video and they want it to be vertical, but you don't have the resolution and you have to do reshoots and they can't do reshoots. Well, then you just have to say, I'm sorry, we can't provide that. That wasn't in the scope. That wasn't in our original agreement. And that's just kind of how you steamroll through stuff like that, because you've had it already set in paper. So I think you kind of cover your base there. And if you're trying to just please the client extra, you can't, that's okay. Like you guys already had it in writing what you were supposed to deliver.
So that's really good. Contracts and having stuff in writing is very, very important, especially when you're working with high profile clients.
Definitely,
like that.
You don't want to jump in without a contract. I mean, you can have a little bit of like understanding of, oh yeah, we want to shoot this, and you can do maybe a little bit of research. But honestly, the more time you spend on something, the more free stuff they're getting. And not to sound like stingy or anything, but you're working so you can get paid, so you can pay your rent, so you can whatever it is, so you can invest in that next new thing. And the more work that you're doing just pro bono for free for that client, the more they kind of take advantage of that, because who doesn't like free stuff?
Exactly. And especially, who doesn't like free high quality stuff?
Yeah.
So I have just a couple more questions, because I feel like I'm going to get kicked out here by one of the librarians, because I only have the room for an hour. So just a couple more questions and we'll wrap things up. So you mentioned in your biography that you wanted to shoot some more music videos. And I thought that was kind of interesting, because I love your music videos, and I've seen some of the stuff that you've worked on with Rick, and it's really, really, really good stuff. I love the type of creative edge that you give it. Why do you want to work on more music videos? Like, is there something special about them?
I think there's this kind of like invisible ladder of what things are, at least in my view and how I view them. I see it kind of as like client work, which is the talking heads, testimonials thing. And then you have documentaries, which is a little bit more interesting. Then you have music videos, which is just a little bit more creative. I mean, you can start adding fire effects for a rock show in the background or whatever. And then you have those like short films and then feature films. That's kind of the ramp, and TV commercials is somewhere in there. It depends on the client and the commercial. But that's kind of the ramp that I'm headed up into. I've done a couple of TV commercials. I've done a couple of documentaries. I've done way too many client videos of testimonials. And I've done just a few music videos, like 10 or 12. And they're always so much fun to work on. It's just a massive amount of creativity when you're working with people like that. And it's, depending on how big the video is, it's a couple of days of work, and you're shooting multiple locations, and like just the actors or the people on screen are always super passionate, because it's their music and they're finally singing it out to an audience that is more than they're used to. So it's really fun to work with people like that in music videos. The energy is always high. I think the next step after that would be just bigger short films and features, but that's way, way down the road.
Yeah, that's interesting. So it kind of you kind of prioritize everything, just like how what I've done is I've kind of when I was at Full Sail, I kind of started working on like working in WWE, which was kind of like live production. I worked on, video editing. I worked on a little bit of everything. And I'm like, this just isn't my thing. I enjoy doing it, but it's not something I want to continue pursuing. And even like out in the industry after, I've worked on doing like public relations and doing this and that. Like, yeah, these things will kind of come full circle. And it's really nice to have the knowledge and the experience, but it's not something I want to continue pursuing. So you kind of then like, yeah, I can do it, but it's not number one on my priority list. Like I'd prefer to work on, doing this, or I'd prefer to work on doing that. And then, but
Totally.
occasionally that gig will come and you'll be like, okay, I have the knowledge, I have the experience, I might as well just take it. So like you just mentioned working on like shorter films, maybe even feature films. What are some of your, like the last couple of questions, what is your ultimate goal? Like whether it be a project you want to work on, a company, a person, what is one of your ultimate goals, whether it be, like starting your own company, whatever it is, like AIE, kind of continue growing that. What is your ultimate goal?
So I've been extremely blessed, and I thank God for that, to be able to do everything kind of dream that He's put on my heart. I've been able to achieve. I didn't think that I was going to be going to. I mean, Full Sail was a dream for me, and I got to go to Full Sail. I was able to afford that, and then the next thing you know, I'm like in New York City, and I've always dreamed of being and living in New York City, and I'm living here now, and I dreamed of flying out and shooting like videos and then flying back for New York City as home base, and I'm doing that now. I mean, I did some documentaries in Israel and Haiti, and like just being able to fly out and shoot something and come back and have a house here is, it's lovely, it's amazing, it's a dream come true. And now I'm kind of focusing on whatever God puts in front of me now, and I feel like I don't really have a big goal. I mean, there is one funny thing. My dad said, if I make a cowboy movie, that I have to go on stage, and if I get an Oscar for it, I have to go on stage. And I said, I'm just here to thank my dad, because he told me to make a cowboy movie, so I just made it for him, and then just walk off stage. That's the only goal I have, and it's silly, but I guess that's something worth reaching to. It's besides the silliness, it's definitely a dream to be able to be in such a well-known and respected place for creatives.
Yeah, and I have no doubt in my mind that you'll eventually get that Oscar, and I'll be in the audience or on TV, rooting for you. So I have no doubt in my mind. Or who knows, maybe we'll even work on it together.
There you go.
Which would be really cool, because this industry can place you in certain situations that you had no idea were even possible, or why or how they even came about, and you've experienced that, just like I have. So, kind of the last question to kind of bring it all home, where you're still burgeoning in the entertainment industry, you're continuing to grow, you're building your resume, you're learning all kinds of stuff from all kinds of industry veterans like Frank Shearing. What are some tips and tricks that, say, a fellow Full Sail grad or a recent grad or somebody wanting to get into this industry, what are some tips and tricks that you would, or advice that you would like to give to them to kind of continue going, or how to, be as successful as you and continue working on big projects?
Show up. Just you gotta show up. You gotta make the calls. You gotta reach out to people. You gotta be interested in other people's stuff. You gotta just make sure that you're connecting with people on a regular basis. It pretty much sounds like networking, because it is. The Full Sail drilled that into me. It was networking is the main thing. Networking is this. Networking is that. And I blew it off my shoulder, like, I don't need to network, whatever. And then I got to New York and I was like, oh, I need to network. No one's going to just give me their movie. And so the biggest thing, especially if you're in a big city, if you're like in New York City or even like Philadelphia or whatever, Vancouver, wherever you are, jumping into the creative industry there, whether it's going to meetups or whether it's going to like a poetry reading at your local library and you just find someone that you like their book and you want to make a video out of. Just expressing yourself outside of your four-walled room and outside of those emails, just getting out there is what you need to do. And if you're in a small town city, the next best thing to do is just start something there. Start something that maybe you have a bunch of friends that are in video there, or maybe you have just a couple of people that they like to skate around the park, your local park. Go and film them skating. I have some friends that they started out skating with their friends and they didn't have that much of skill, so they ended up just filming their friends skating, and now they're shooting stuff for Nike and they're shooting stuff for Audi, however you say that car company. And it takes time. It definitely does. You can't make a best friendship in 4 hours. You need some time. So the same thing with, you can't make an entire career in a day. And that's the most frustrating piece, just learning that, and just continuing to chug through is definitely something that I would champion everybody to do. It's just a huge encouragement.
Yeah, I definitely vouch for that. Is you have to show up, you have to prove yourself, you have to continue to network and show your, stand out, amongst the competition. So, last and final thing, how can people that are listening keep up with you, can follow you, can kind of see your work? Where's the best place to get into contact with you if they want to work with you on a project, or even just follow your work because they enjoy it?
Yeah, so professionally, I definitely would say go to our website, www.AIEcollective.com, and you'll be able to see out there who we've been able to serve, the crew that we consistently work with, and also kind of our reels and the videos that we've done. So if you want to get a little bit of a look there. But personally, if you just want to hang out or grab a coffee, I'm in Brooklyn in New York City. Just shoot me a DM on Instagram. My Instagram is Julian __Velez, JULIAN __VELEZ. And just reach out to me and I'll be more than happy to grab a cup of coffee if I'm in the city with you.
Cool. Yeah. And I'll definitely put all that, that information in the show notes as well. So you can just click on it and it'll be there forever. But thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. And you gave us a lot of cool information and tips and tricks and kind of your story. So, we'll be in touch. I wish you nothing but continued success and, keep doing good things.
It's been an honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of When Life Hands You Lemons. I hope that you enjoyed my chat with Mr. Julian Velez. He continues to be and has been one of my biggest inspirations because of his continued successes within his respective industry. He continues to prove time and time again that his talents, his humble personality, continues to prove and grant him the rewards and the opportunities that he so very much deserves. Julian has, like I said, been a great friend of mine since we met during our beginning of our Full Sail journeys, and he continues to do amazing things. As always, be sure to follow me on social media, on Twitter, on LinkedIn. You can add me on there. Also, be sure to subscribe to the mailing list for this podcast, as it will notify you when a new episode is live, as well as getting some music industry tips and tricks so you can further your career within the music industry. I also would encourage you to support this podcast on Patreon, as every little bit helps to better this podcast, and any money that I make through this podcast will go right back into it to make it better for the audience. So I hope that you enjoyed and learned something from Mr. Velez in our chat. From his working as a contractor, a freelancer, from being an employee to now focusing on his own company. and working with high profile clients. So again, all of his social medias links will be in the show notes below, as he had mentioned as he thanked us. So give him a follow, check out some of his work. You won't be disappointed. And we will see you on the next episode of When Life Hands You Lemons.